name is Leroy Blevins. Welcome to Mysteries and Histories. In this episode here, what I like to do is I want to talk a little bit about Mr. Zapruder and things I found, as well as analyzing films and images, and trying to make some sense of all this because it's like, all we're told is basically Oswald was the lone assassin, that was it. But as everybody's seen in my research, I found more evidence to show there was more to it than what we were told, just like Mr. Zapruder. Now, when Mr. Zapruder got done filming that day, which first we're going to talk about, let's go do it this way first. We're going to talk about the location that he was filming. As you see here, this is the map I always study when I do my investigation on the JFK assassination. Now, a lot of researchers take just in one factor, just one vehicle, and that's it, JFK's limo. As for me, this is how I look at it. Now, we know there's other cameras around. There's still images taken. And plus, other movies, the films was being filmed. But, however, let's look at Mr. Zapruder. Mr. Zapruder had a prime spot when he filmed the assassination. Mr. Zapruder was the only one that filmed the whole assassination from beginning to end. This makes me wonder because when you do an investigation and when you're doing research, everybody's a suspect. Everybody knows that when there's a murder case, everybody's a suspect until they're eliminated. But like I said, when I'm looking at this, here's Mr. Zapruder in a location with nobody else around him filming or taking images. People that's taking, if you watch my cursor, Mr. Zapruder standing right here, him and Mrs. Setzman. They're the only ones in this whole area right here. That's taking pictures or filming. Over here, yeah, there's Orville Nix, there's the Babushka lady, there's Mary Mormon, and there's people up here, much more filming up here and then running down here, and then the Bronson film, okay? These people are filming at far distance. As for Mr. Zapruder, he's filming up close, basically, and he films the whole assassination. So when I was sitting there thinking about this, and he's on the right side of the motorcade and not the left side as well. So when I was sitting there thinking about this for a minute, then it started to make me wonder when I started reading that when Mr. Zapruder was the first one who made money off the JFK assassination. He made $50,000. Now, there's a lot of different figures that people throws out there, and it's hard to pinpoint, but I know there was a $50,000 that he got for his film. However, Mr. Zapruder didn't accept the money. He gave the money to his secretary. Also, I'd like to add that Mr. Zapruder just bought that camera 2 weeks prior to the assassination, and he only bought one roll of film. Now, he filmed a little bit of his family and Mrs. Setzman and stuff like that. Then the rest of the film is just the assassination. Now, I find it all funny that here's a man that just buys a camera 2 weeks prior to the assassination, only buys one roll of film. After he films the assassination, he don't want to do no more filming whatsoever. When he sold his film, which is the same day or the next morning, he turned the money over to his secretary. He didn't take a dime of it. He turned all the money over to her. After he got done filming, he went straight to the newsroom, gave his story, how to try to get the film developed and everything else. And that makes me suspicious on why was he so much in a rush. Now, they claim that Mrs. Setzman was on the wall with Mr. Zapruder to stabilize him because he had vertigo. But when we watch the films, we can see that Mrs. Setzman gets off the wall, jumps down off the wall. Mr. Zapruder jumps down off the wall and starts walking away like it was nothing going on. But everybody knows when you have vertigo, you lose your step, your footing. When you come down even off the wall, you have to have help coming down off the wall. When you get off the wall, you have to stand there for a minute to get your footing and calm yourself down and everything else like that. But here's Mr. Zapruder jumps down off the wall and just starts walking away. So I started getting suspicious. So when I started analyzing the films and images and stuff like that, I noticed something because when I was going over the Orville Nix film, I kept my eyes on Mr. Zapruder and Mrs. Setzman in that location. And as you see here, I would zoom it in more, but it's kind of hard to zoom it in because when I click over, it drops back. So we're just going to do it this way. This is frame 41 of the Zapruder film. And as you see, Mrs. Setzman's hands are coming up and covering Mr. Zapruder's ears. So you look around here. I'm going to go back. As you see here, her arm's not right here or anything else. You know, she's got one hand right here on Mr. Zapruder's shoulder, but the other arm ain't extended out. Now, when we watch the film, we can start seeing her hand, as you see here, her arm coming up and covering upside Mr. Zapruder's ears, as you see here. Now we see both of her arms, one on this side of Mr. Zapruder's head, one on this side of Mr. Zapruder's head, and she's covering his ears. So she's like this, then we see her coming up like this. So we're going to go back. I'm going to show you again. Now keep an eye on that location, right where my cursor is. You see this location here, you're going to start seeing her arm come up and her hand come up and cover Mr. Zapruder's ears. Here we go. Next frame, next frame, next frame, next frame. Here's her arm coming up and hands coming up. Now she's at full extension where she's completely covering Mr. Zapruder's ears. This is why even in the Bronson film shows the same thing. But that's why when we look at the Bronson film, when we zoom in, if we look over here, it looks like Mr. Zapruder's not in front of her, but he is. But we can see her arm as you watch my cursor, her arm right here with arm coming up and her hand covered over Mr. Zapruder's ears. Like I'll show you right here. We do this close up. Now we know her arms are down in the frames before. But then they come up and cover Mr. Zapruder's ears. As you see over here, this is frame 23, close up. We see her hand or arm's not even there. We see her hand right here on his shoulder. Then as we go along and start watching, as you look over here where my cursor is, now here's her arm extended outward. Here she's got one hand on this side of Mr. Zapruder's face and a hand on this side of Mr. Zapruder's face, because this is Mr. Zapruder's face right here. Here's his camera. Here's his head. There's his hat. Here's his hand holding the camera. Now, when we watch the frames and stuff, all of a sudden we see Mrs. Setzman's hands and arms come up. Now she's got one hand covered over Mr. Zapruder's ear here, and one hand with her arm right here, extended out, holding Mr. Zapruder's ear like this. So she's behind Mr. Zapruder, one hand here, holding his ears. So because the shots are being fired from behind him. We'll pull this one back up. Now this is location. As I just showed you, and as the facts I'm pointing out, in my research, as you know, as you watch my cursor, I found one gum in here and one gum in here. This is based on photographic evidence from the Orville Nix film, Bronson film, Mormon photo, Darnell film, and other images taken that day. This is all based on that, and the shots being seen and fired. Now, here's Mr. Zapruder and Mrs. Setzman standing right behind him. They're filming the whole assassination. She brings up her arms and her hands and cover over Mr. Zapruder's ears when the shots are being fired from behind them to keep them steady. That's why when you watch the film, and if you know how to analyze films and stuff like that, you will see there's jumps in the film when the two shots were fired. That's when JFK's head exploded and the shot in the back of Governor Connolly's back. So, by my research, I would have to say, and by the evidence that I've seen and I've collected, I would have to say that Mr. Zapruder have to have some kind of hand into it. Why would he give the $50,000 away to somebody? I mean, $50,000 is like $1 million in today's money, because that's a lot of money. Give the money away to someone else. Don't want to film no more. Don't want his camera no more. Only had a camera for 2 weeks and only bought one roll of film. Only person that's filming on that side of the road. No one else is around him. We know there was two gunmen behind him. He was quick getting off that wall and going to do some filming. To go get the film developed. So there's a lot of strong evidence there that makes somebody suspicious, especially when we're seeing in films where Mrs. Setzman's bringing her hands up and covering Mr. Zapruder's ears. Why? To hold him steady, because they claimed he had vertigo. But, you know, like I said, I pointed out in the films, we can see him jumping down. And when he jumps down, this is what surprises me. Then when we watch him jump down, as you watch my cursor right here, when he jumps down, he's jumping partial on the steps and partial on the flat step. I mean, the flat part right here. So he's got 1 foot landing here when he's jumping down, another foot right here. But he doesn't fall. He doesn't stumble or turn around, get on his knees, and climb down that way. He jumps off, and he's got 1 leg landing on 1 step and then the other one above the next step. So that makes me wonder as well. Like I said, we have 2 gunmen behind Mr. Zapruder. Mr. Zapruder is the only one who filmed the whole assassination. Mr. Zapruder was the first one in the newsroom that gave an interview and claimed that the assassin was behind him. So there's a lot of things that's very suspicious about this when it comes to watching this film and looking over the evidence and trying to puzzle and piece everything together. So I thought I just brought this out as I showed you here in the next film, that we could see Mrs. Setzman bringing arms up and hands and covering up Mr. Zapruder's ears, which made it very suspicious. Mr. Zapruder, both floors, he ran the 4th and 5th floor of the Dow Tex building, and he made sure that all them people were gone that day from his 2 floors that he ran, and made sure they was outside to watch the motorcade go by. So, you know, like I said, there's a lot of things that you have to look at when you're doing an investigation or doing research on a subject like this, because everybody's a suspect until everything is, you know, all the evidence and everything else is laid out. So, was Mr. Zapruder behind the assassination as well? That's for you to judge. Okay, I'm just showing you some evidence here. We can't rule it out. To be honest with you, we can't rule him out at this time. But I just thought I'll bring this up and show people. And yeah, there's something funny going there. Thank you.